You're listening to Becoming CEO, where we share our journeys as solo founders to becoming the CEO of seven-figure businesses.
And these are our behind-the-scenes conversations as we figure it out, and these are things that most people just aren't sharing. So, are you afraid of being a winner?
I'm afraid of everything at this stage. I think so, yeah. Fear of success. It's funny because we coach our clients on this all the time. I think the fear of success is real.
100%
fear of failure
real.
is real. Fear of success is real too. Because when you succeed and you achieve your goals and you get all the things that you want to get, I think there's a couple of questions that come up as a result. Number one, who am I going to become in the process? Like, what changes about me, about my identity, the way that I show up? How am I going to be viewed in the community? You know, by the herd, by the crowd, by the posse, right? Whether that's your family, your friend circle, whatever, right? And then, how's that going to change me? Am I still going to be the same person? Am I still going to have the qualities that I like about myself? Or will the money and the fame, and obviously there's no fame in the game that we play here, but just for dramatic purposes, right? Will all the money and the fame change who I am and turn me into somebody I don't want to be?
Do you not see yourself as successful now?
That's a great question. I absolutely do.
So then what's different from the success that you have versus the success that you're afraid of?
I guess it's degrees of success. Like this, and this is probably a figment of my imagination, but in my mind, it's like, yeah, we do well. Business does well. I do well, but I wouldn't consider myself wealthy.
So is that what success means? Is being wealthy? Like, what does success mean, I guess?
And I'm speaking here more so in terms of financial terms, right? So I'm not, by no means am I trying to imply that success is strictly monetary? No, but I am speaking about this in monetary terms.
Okay.
Right? Because what triggered this is we were mapping out our goals for 2023. The time of this recording, it's beginning of Feb 2023, and we're just finalizing our financial targets for 2023. And we got some big goals. Numbers in terms of less so revenue, but more so profit that we've never hit before. It's new territory. And what my mind's been trying to process, well, what happens if we hit those goals? How do I feel about them? What makes me nervous about it? And what makes me nervous about it is actually doing it.
So you had mentioned before we started recording, this number was the target is actually a target you've had before, but you haven't hit.
Correct.
Why do you, like, when you look at that number, I know you mentioned mathematically it all checks out. And I'm not saying what I'm about to say is what you're doing, but someone said to me once, which I think it's very true. It's like, I can build a $10 million a year business in a spreadsheet, but like actually doing it is entirely different. And so like, yeah, mathematically, a lot of numbers check out, but also don't account for a lot of things that happen in reality. And so like, why didn't you hit it last year or whatever year it was when that was the target? And is it actually like knowing how far off were you from it? That is this actually a realistic goal despite it checking out on a spreadsheet?
Practically, we're talking about doubling our profit.
Okay.
And I think that's part of what makes me nervous, to your point, is last year the spreadsheet looked pretty good. Right? The math looked really, really flawless, right? And I used to be an accountant. You know, I know my way around the spreadsheet. And it looked good, and I didn't think we were making any wild assumptions. And then what we didn't know was going to happen happened. Last year in particular, this is my reading of the year, but it's not necessarily accurate. Number one, in Q1, we got blindsided by iOS 14, which completely disrupted our marketing funnel. We had to rebuild that. We spent about a quarter licking our wounds and rebuilding that. And then we had a good Q2. And then Q3, I think we were affected by recessionary fear. And we had a really tough Q3. And that forced a bunch of decisions in the business that made us pull back, reduce ad spend, lean out the team a little bit. And then we had a fantastic Q4. I don't know what I don't know about this year, right? I don't have a crystal ball that's going to tell me what's going to happen in Q1 or Q2 or Q3 or Q4. I think we're stronger as a result of those experiences. I think we've now put in mitigating initiatives that mitigate the risks that we know of because we've experienced them. I don't know what risks we don't know about.
Yeah.
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah. So you're afraid of hitting it. Are you afraid of not hitting it?
Not really. Is that damning?
I don't know. I guess so.
Well, maybe the reason why is important. It's a good question. If I don't hit it, nothing changes. That's comfortable. Like we're talking about hitting a fairly aggressive, I was going to say life-changing. I mean, maybe that's being dramatic, but I would say if it persists, a life-changing profit goal, yes. Like it won't change my life this year, but if we keep doing it, it will.
So what if you grew, but you grew to like one of the things that's going through my mind is like, why that number? Why not half of that number or 75% of that number? Like, what would be actually different from hitting the goal that you have versus hitting half of the goal and or 75% of the goal? Like, is the magnitude of success really does it really change that much of like your life? So take the number that you're targeting. Why that number versus say half of that number or say 75% of that number? Like, what's the real difference in quote unquote success and or life changingness if it were half and or even 75% or any other number other than that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's partially arbitrary, like the number that we're obviously deliberately not sharing here. Mostly because I'm uncomfortable saying it out loud. The number is...
Because you're afraid of it?
Yeah, I'm also afraid of what the reaction is to it for a whole bunch of reasons, but I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's just how it is. The number is intimidating. So there's that. It's arbitrary to a certain extent. But it also represents, again, like if we hit it this year, it doesn't change much of anything apart from it gives the business, like this is not money that this year I would pull out of the company and just spend. Right? This is money that if we hit this profit goal this year, it's going to stay in the business. And it's going to be a war chest, essentially. And it's going to give us as a business more financial security and more confidence that we can withstand any potential market disruptions, et cetera. Okay. So that's great, powerful, reassuring. And then if we keep doing that number, if we keep generating that kind of profit, then it's, financial security for my family and generational wealth for generations to come. If I keep that pace for the next 30 years, 40 years. And that's big.
Is keeping that pace realistic?
What's realistic? If I can do it once, why can't I do it again and then some?
I'm not saying that you can't.
It's a good question. Like I think I have self-doubt around, can I really do that kind of profit every single year until I die or until I choose to stop running the business? I mean, there's probably some self-doubt there, but at the same time, it's like, well, what got you here? If you could do it once, it's the product of sound decision-making, sound strategy, sound leadership, sound business fundamentals. If you could do it once, I mean, I'm not naive in that I don't think over the course of 20, 30 years, profit goes up and to the right every year. I understand, nor does revenue. I understand that. But, on average, why can't I do it again and again and again and again?
Would you be less afraid of it if you like it took 2 or 3 years to get to it? Like if you extend the runway, like does it take away some of the fear? Like is the fear because the fear of success, like actually hitting it, or is it actually because it's such a big goal that I'm not sure doing that in a year is realistic, and thus does some of that fear go, like is the fear based in pressure, and if we extend the horizon to hit the goal, does the fear go away?
See, to me, the math addresses realism. I can't look at it and say this is not realistic because I've done the math. And yes, the math doesn't necessarily account for unexpected, unforeseen risk. True. The math has assumptions built in, but assuming those assumptions are reasonable and grounded in reality, I can't look at that. The numbers don't lie, right? I can't look at that and go like, no, this is too aggressive. It's not. It's not too aggressive, and there's no major aggressive assumptions in the math. So I don't think it's too fast. On the contrary, this is what gets me excited. Is I think now is the opportunity. I think we have a lot of good things going on right now in the business. We have a lot of strengths right now in the business that we can capitalize on. And the nature of the only constant in business is change. I think that we have an episode to that title, right? And so I don't know if we're always going to be in this position. Make hay while the sun is shining is kind of the motto right now. We've got a lot of good things going on. Let's capitalize. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's is there anything does it matter that you're afraid of being successful? Like, can you carry on despite this fear?
Yeah. So here's a tangential point here that I think is maybe worth calling out because it's hitting me right now. In the beginning, I was like, I wanted to get to a certain number. I think it was like 300K a month. Oh, actually, that's not true. In the beginning, I want to get to 100K a month, and then I want to get to 200, and then I wanted to get to 300. But for some reason, 300 was like the upper limit. Like, I didn't really want to go beyond that. It's about $4 or $5 million a year, right? And for some reason, I just assumed that once I get to 300K a month, I'll always be at 300K a month. Right? Why would that change? And there would be no reason to retreat. And there would be no reason to scale down or to cut down. And that would just be this constant line. And maybe, you dip a little bit below, dip a little bit above. You have a good month, you have a bad month, but you'd average out to right about there. And that was obviously naive in retrospect. And when we went through what we've talked about on this podcast, and you and me talked about at length, when we went through about, feels like 5-6 months ago now, the constraining of the business, we shrank by about 30 to 40% in Q3 of last year on purpose after some challenging circumstances. And then we kind of rebuilt ourselves, and we had a really good fourth quarter, and now it's Q1, and we're feeling really good about 2023 and talking about growing again. And I think the lesson I've learned through that experience is it doesn't have to be constant. You can shrink and you can grow, and there's times to do both, and that's okay. One of the concerns I had about shrinking or constraining or retreating was, what if it's permanent? What if we do this and then for some reason have this bias towards permanency? Like everything feels permanent, right? What if we do it and then we don't grow again? Which again was obviously naive.
Yeah, we were. I'm in a mastermind, and Todd Herman's in there, who wrote the 90-Day Year and the Alter Ego Effect, and is high performance coach for like big athletes and stuff like that. And the conversation was around like, it was like the hardest thing that we struggle with is to determine what we want. And he goes, no, actually, the hardest thing is admitting what we want. And he said that one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make, professional athletes included, it's like what do we want and admitting that. So admitting that I want this ridiculous profit margin or hit this, ridiculously large in my mind profit number. We tie it to this like never ending, like this is, it's like binary. It's like, it's black or white. That's it. And he's like, why can't we just say that's what I want to hit right now? Like this season of my life, I'm in a season where I want to and feel like it's an opportune time for us to get to this number. And if we get there, when I get there, I can decide if that's a number that we want to try to sustain. So like if we hit this number and we do it for 10 years in a row, it's like, bro, like, how about we get there 1 year first and then decide, and or 2 years, and then like decide if we want to do it, try to like push again, or like, because if there's, if there's any sort of like, for example, like lack of recurring revenue inside of this thing, like in some way you kind of have to put out probably the same amount of effort to hit it again and again and again, if there's not some sort of recurring stability in that. So it's like, yeah, you got to keep showing up the way that you did all year this year as a team, firing on, all cylinders the way that you are, or as a well-oiled machine. It's like, there's also, which that might not show up in the spreadsheet. Like, can y'all sustain that? We don't know what that looks like yet. Like, if our team hasn't hit it, it's like, why don't you just say, hey, like, I want this number. We want to hit it this year. We're going to go for it. And if you do, then cool. Do we want to do it again? Let's do it again. Cool. Do we want to do it again? Let's do it again. So I think there's like the disconnecting it from the forever. Like, oh, well, we have to do this for 10 years in a row before I retire. It's like, I don't know. Sometimes that I'm trying to work on that myself in a lot of areas. It's like, hey, like I want what I want right now. And I know that probably in 3 years, 5 years, that what I want is going to be different. And that's okay, because I'm going to be in a different season of life. Like we talked about, 5-6 months ago, and some of the things, like we don't go as hard as a lot of our peers because like they don't have kids, or like we want to be a part of our children's lives. And like that requires compromise. Like there's a trade-off. Like I don't want to do what is necessary to hit some of the numbers that I know people are going after, nor would I ever try, because that's just not important to me. And when I have that conversation with myself, some of that fear goes away, because I know for me, and I don't know anyone listening, half of the time when I throw out some of these numbers, it's a goal that, like you said, is possibly arbitrary, but in most cases has been defined by me wanting what someone else has and not spending the time on wanting, like knowing what I am actually happy with and what I want. And it's like the fear of the ego. Like we were in the season that you were in like 6 months ago. It's like intentionally trying to, I don't want to say, scale down in how we operate in order to be healthier foundationally to scale back up. And honestly, one of the ego things that I'm dealing with is I think of like when I say how large our business is in top line, which we both know doesn't mean really anything because it's a vanity number. Like the immediate thought that is in my brain that makes me afraid is, well, what will the other person think when I say the number out of my mouth? Not how I feel about that number. Like it's always like, what will someone else think of me when I say I'm doing X versus Y? When Y was maybe better in their mind. But I'm actually healthier, profitable, happier at X. Like there's still that, like, I think there's always going to be that fear of something, whether it's fear of success, but like, not that take this for what it's worth. Like, I feel like I know you pretty well. Like you're a class act kind of guy. Like you're there for your family. You like more than half of your Instagram is like you being a part of your children's lives. Like, I don't think you making any more money than you make right now is going to maybe change, maybe have some cooler experiences, but like you're not an a-hole now. And so like, I don't think that you're just going to automatically become an a-hole or show up any differently than you do because you make more money. Like everyone that at least I've met that makes a lot of money has always said it just amplifies the person that you really were. And so it's like, if you really feel comfortable with who you are right now, then there's really like, I don't think that should be a fear of like you become this bad person because you're not that person now.
I mean, the main blemish on my record is I drive a BMW, and there's only a certain type of person that drives a BMW.
I mean, you could say that about people that drive Mercedes and Audi too. So
no,
I don't know.
BMW drivers have a reputation. There's a lot of memes.
Maybe we should talk about that.
Something about the cobwebs around the turn signal. There's one.
Yeah,
maybe we should
talk about that.
I pulled up to the stoplight beside one of the hockey coaches from my daughter's team, and he was driving an SUV, and he starts revving up just as a joke, right, against my car. And then I was showing off for his son in the back, right? So we took off. I peeled out and I smoked him, obviously. And then and I changed lanes, and then we talked the next day, and I was like, oh, that was fun. He was like, yeah, I'm surprised the turn signal worked in your BMW there. I didn't know you knew how to use that. Right? So I have my a-hole qualities as well, apparently. But I think the lack of permanency is a really important point. And I think it addresses both types of fear, right? Fear of failure and fear of success.
Yeah.
Because if, on the failure side, if you can entertain the idea that, yeah, you could fail and your failure is temporary and there's nothing permanent about it. And if you fail once, it doesn't mean you fail forever. It helps you get over that fear.
Yeah. What's interesting about that you reminded me of, there's this, I don't know what episode I heard it on, but that guy, Adam Grant, who wrote, what is it? Think something.
Something good.
Yeah. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. It came up in an interview recently where he was like, people are like talking about, very often you hear the statement like, well, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And he's like, I actually would rather reverse that question and say, well, what would you do if you knew that you were going to fail? And so it's like, okay, so is this still a goal that you're going to want to pursue, knowing that if you knew that you were going to fail? Like, is it that worthy of the cause? Like, it's that interesting to you, that important?
Yes.
Like, yeah. So then if you're comfortable with the fact that you would do this, knowing that you will fail and you still would want to do it, then like, even then, like, how can you like remind yourself of that? I feel like that should also help take some of the fear away, because it's like, hey, even if I did fail, I'm still going to do this. Like, I would do it anyway.
Yeah, and I think there's something about the way I structured it, which I kind of like, to be honest. I mean, we're talking about doubling our profit goal. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. And it's not ideal, and it's not terrible, right? It's another year and nothing changes. And I'm not by any means dissatisfied with the way things are, right? So would I like to be further ahead a year from now? Sure. Is it the end of the world if I'm not? No.
Here's a question for you, and this may not mathematically be possible, but it probably could. What if you could, because just the way you said it, like this conversation started out with, we want to hit this number in profit, which is double. What if you could stay the exact same size, but also still double your profit? Like top line stays the same, but you actually operationally figure out a way to double profit.
I don't love that for a bunch of reasons, and I don't know if it takes us off track. I can tell you the simple reason why, actually. It boils down to this. Our current cost structure allows me to do what I want to do and focus in the areas that I want to focus on. Getting more efficient with the same revenue level means I need to become more versatile, which I don't necessarily want to do right now.
Got it. Cool. Fair.
Yeah. So I think it's a fair question for everybody. That's my answer, though.
Yeah. No, fair.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of played into a conversation we were having before recording, like one of the moves we were going to make, it's like related to a person. And it's like, oh, well, this thing would fall back on my plate, but which I could totally do. I'd probably enjoy doing, but the amount of time that I get to spend on other things because that person's doing it on my behalf, it's like there's still something, like I was talking to a friend of mine he's like, yeah, some of the people that we, compare ourselves to that have these like crazy profits, don't have the same amount of freedom that I have. And he's like, so I'll take a smaller margin to not have to be responsible for that thing
Heck
anymore.
yeah. That's profit.
And it's like time
Time is profit.
Yeah. So,
right.
I think that's also interesting, like, because, and for those just, I don't know, maybe this is helpful for some of you guys. Like, you hear some people are like, oh, like 50, 60% margins. Like, you really only hear about that, like in the like internet marketing space. Like, to have like a 20, 30% profit margin in a service-based business is really good. And can you get it to 40 and 50? Yes. Can you get it to 70 and 80? Like some people talk about, like, that's kind of stretching like reality on like what your time might look like. And obviously from a service business perspective, if your business model is different, that could be different. But like if you're in consulting, coaching, profit could be tied to your free time.
So I think it's a really interesting point. I'm doing the math in my head. I could double my profits easily by getting rid of a bunch of people and doing all that work myself. And I think I could do it. I haven't done this math, in detail, obviously, because I'm just doing it on the spot. I think I could do it, and still be working. I'd probably be pushing 45 to 50 hours a week. Okay. So working hard, I could double my profit.
How many hours do you work right now?
Who's listening?
The entire internet.
Okay. So that's a tricky question because there's the hours I need to work and there's the hours that I work. Right. And so I think the more relevant question is the hours I need to work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the hours that you need to work?
10 a week. I'm working more than that, but it's not because I need to. It's because I'm doing things that I like to do that are interesting, that are, this is a good example. This does not in any meaningful way at this stage contribute to my revenue. I've got another podcast that we're launching, which in the immediate will not in any meaningful way contribute to our revenue in the short term. So all kinds of things that I do because I enjoy doing them or participating in the activity that I don't necessarily need to do. And to, cut the team / expenses, double profit would mean all this stuff goes away. And now I'm front lines in the business doing work, making tons of money, but have no free time. It would be the opposite of, Dan Martell's buying back your time. I'd be selling back my time at that stage.
Yeah. I mean, this episode specifically, not all, but like you could probably eliminate some therapy. So we, offsetting that as a good use of your time.
There you go. Saving money left, right, and center.
Yeah. So an exercise, maybe we can like, well, I don't know. I guess, how are you feeling? Like, because, this started off as like, you're afraid of this number, like, which I think we're all human. I think fear of success is like, we've gone through a couple, frameworks and things to say to yourself and mantras, whatever, that I think could probably help eliminate or mitigate some of this fear. But nonetheless, like, you're a human. That's okay. That's normal. Like, you're going to pursue this despite the fear of success. So like, then what are we really afraid of anyway? So I think that's all well and good. Something that I've been thinking about that kind of like really ties this is like, one of my old mentors took me through it. He calls it the return. And it's like, you basically fill out, like, there's 3 columns: time, energy, money. And it's like, and the frame is, what return, like, my business needs to provide me a return in my time, in my energy, and in money. What is the amount of time that I want to have working, or how do I want to spend my time, days, working hours, weeks, whatever? Where do I want to be spending my energy inside that business? Like, on what, like those 10 hours, like if I'm spending 10 hours a week on business, like what do I want those 10 hours to be? And then how much money do I want to be paid for that? In order for me to say that I would literally do business this way and run this business forever, as long as it checked the boxes in time, energy, and money. And like, it's like, I've been doing it. Like, it's really interesting. I'm like, man, like I wouldn't compromise. There's a lot of things that I won't compromise for the amount of free time that I have. Like, I fundamentally take Fridays off. I mean, assuming it's not winter, because I can't go mountain biking. So like I work on Fridays, but like if I don't have to work on Fridays, I don't. And if I choose not to, I don't. Like I kind of work probably 20 hours a week, like active work. I mean, I think about business a lot more, and I'd much rather make what I'm making now. And I know I can make a little bit more, but like I'd even take a little bit less if I could continue this schedule for another 10 years. Like I would not be unhappy. And I don't think people think about that number, whatever that number might be, from time, energy, money.
So I think that's actually, that crystallizes precisely what makes me nervous. Because if I hit the number that we want to hit this year, in fact, if I hit 3/4 of it, this is true as well, anywhere from 75% to 100% of the goal, then I found that sweet spot, time, energy, and money. Because I already have it in terms of time and energy. And the only thing that's lacking, although I hesitate to use that word, lacking is the wrong word. The only place where there's a little bit more desire for more is on the financial side. And so if I do it, again, it's what makes me nervous. It's like, well, where do you go from here? Like, this is it. Like, got it made. And then is it consistent? Can it be replicated? Can it be done over and over and over again? But again, I think giving yourself permission, or in my case, giving myself permission to, things change. It might get better. It might get worse. Can you keep chipping away at it, make improvements every year? Absolutely. Right. So just removing that expectation of permanency and acknowledging that things will change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But as long as you're averaging out, that graph, when you zoom out of that graph, everything's going up and to the right, despite it's like the stock market, right? Look at the stock market on a per day basis or a per month basis. It's all over the place, but you zoom out in the context of years, and it goes up and to the right. Well, that was helpful.
So, yeah. So you're still afraid, but we're okay with it. And we carry on.
There's a fine line between fear and excitement. So I don't even know the fear is necessarily something to remove, because the opposite of fear is excitement. And yes. I think in my case, and there's a lesson in here, I think, for everybody listening, I'm not necessarily dissatisfied with where I'm at either. So it's not like I'm running away from something or resisting something. I'm quite happy. At the same time, there's some desire and some excitement for a different reality that I'm going to pursue.
Yeah, I actually have used, by the way, steal this. You've used on sales calls. It's pretty good. Two, Venn diagram, two circles, one's fear, one's excitement. And I actually believe, obviously, the overlap, a little bit of both, is actually the perfect mix. Here's why. If you are only 100% afraid and there's zero excitement, then you're not ready. But if you're 100% excited and not afraid at all, you're probably not taking it seriously enough. And so you kind of have to be in the middle. And so it's like, yeah, you're afraid, but you're also excited. And so it's like, you're taking it seriously because there's a lot, there is things at stake. People, you support other people as well, your family, but you also are ready because it's a challenge. Like it's something new. And again, so I feel like you kind of have to have a mix of both for you to even go down this path.
So there's an interesting study that illustrates this point. I don't have a solid reference to it. And so if I'm making it up, I apologize. But I heard about this somewhere from somebody. Okay. And let's hope it's true. So they had a group of men cross a suspension bridge, like between two mountains or two peaks or whatever, right? It was one of these like raggedy suspension bridges. And they crossed the bridge and they kind of surveyed how they were feeling after crossing the bridge. And they all felt afraid. Oh, that was scary. Right? There's fear. That was one group. Second group, they had a attractive woman stand halfway across the bridge. And when the men crossed, they would interact with this woman, and she was a little bit flirtatious in nature, and they had a conversation. Okay. And then they got to the end of the bridge and they asked them how they felt. And the answer was excited. And I think it's an interesting way to look at the problem, right? Like you can choose where to focus. You can choose on looking down, at the river or the rocks below, and then that's going to be scary. or you can look at the girl on the bridge, right? Whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
You can look at the parts of the journey that excite you about being on the journey.
Yeah.
And that'll make all the difference.
Yeah. Love it.
The girl on the bridge, is that the title of this episode?
Yeah. Or, I mean, it could be the girl in the red dress, because that's, from The Matrix. Did you look at the girl in the red dress? Never looked.
It's going to be one of the two.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing. Thanks for being vulnerable. Hopefully this, if anything, listeners, you got to have some of these conversations. And if you thought that other people weren't having them, people at all levels have this conversation. It's totally normal. So hopefully you get it now.
I'm just happy I got away without saying the number.
Yeah, that's impressive. Maybe that's the name of the episode. Pitch the number.
See you, folks.